Polystrate fossils refute deep time, responding to the bizarre assertion that biogenesis doesn't apply to ancient times. And of course, we dive into the mailbag. This is Genesis Week. And welcome to this episode of Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary on news, views, and events pertaining to the Origins controversy, made possible by the supporters of Core Ottawa, citizens for Origins research and education, and exclusive right here on YouTube. Pirate broadcasting from Tracy Island, we show the glory of God in creation and bring you the information the anti-creationists don't want you to see or hear. One of the most talked about shows in science and technology on YouTube. You can find us at Wazooloo.com or GenesisWeek.com, or click the ever so convenient subscribe link up top. And don't forget, you can also peruse other episodes by following the links in the upper corners of each episode. I'm your host, Ian Juby. A spectacular find of a fossil forest in China has garnered some interest. Buried in volcanic ash, these trees were apparently buried in situ. That is, buried upright, right where they grew. Well, I have no problem with the idea of in situ burial. So far, every time I have investigated claims of in situ burial, the claims didn't hold up. Now, this could be a first, simply because of the description of the site. Fossil trees buried and preserved upright in the fossil record are quite common. I've personally studied such finds in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Alberta, and British Columbia, Yellowstone National Park, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and New Mexico. Such fossils, which are buried vertically in the rock, are called polystrate. Poly for many, straight for the strata of rock that the fossil cuts through. Most of the Chinese fossil trees are not trees at all, but rather giant hollow reeds, the same kind of plants we find at Joggins, Nova Scotia. Rock layers are alleged to have taken at least thousands, perhaps millions of years to accumulate. But then we find polystrate fossils cutting through such layers. Well, those trunks won't remain in place for tens of years, let alone thousands or millions. Yet, that is precisely what we are expected to believe. When one reads the literature available at the Joggins Fossil Center or the Museum of Nova Scotia website, they couldn't be more clear. On the Joggins Fossil Cliffs Visitor Center website, we read, "Preserved in situ at Joggins, coal-age trees stand where they grew." We also see a story drawn in Lang Ferguson's book from the Museum of Nova Scotia and at the Joggins Visitor Center, painting a clear picture of gradual burial over time. The Chinese fossil plants are all buried in a layer just 66 centimeters thick, uncovered in a coal mine. Now, there were some trunks that were reported suspended in the rock on an angle, not straight up and down, almost as if the trunk was buried while falling. Now, of course, we also see this at Joggins and elsewhere as well. Clearly, these layers did not take thousands or millions of years to accumulate. On the Museum of Nova Scotia website, we read, "As the plants died and decayed, they became buried and compressed by new organic material growing above. Some of these environments were stable for millions of years, experiencing only gentle subsidence or rhythmic oscillations in elevation. In these locations, tremendous thicknesses of organic material accumulated." We also read in the Museum of Nova Scotia website, "A thick layer or seam of coal tells us that the ancient forest swamp existed for a remarkable length of time. Because peat is compressed as it is transformed into coal, it may take between 5 and 10 meters of peat to form just 1 meter of coal. Therefore, a coal seam that is just 1 meter thick may represent 2,500 to 5,000 years of plant accumulation beneath the ancient forest swamps. Yet, we find some stumps buried polystrate through coal seams. And sometimes coal seams are a mere quarter-inch thick. Were they a quarter-inch deep swamp? The Chinese find was also found in a coal mine, allegedly a peat bog. Obviously, there are huge problems with the conventional interpretation of time and the origin of coal. There's also a problem with the in situ interpretation of the stumps. For example, Some stumps of polystrates have the roots sheared off, while other roots have the rootlets stripped off. Clear evidence that the plants have been uprooted, then buried elsewhere in an upright position. Now, some of the stumps are upside down. Now, I proved just how lousy a gardener I was when all of my plants committed suicide. However, one thing I did not do wrong was try to grow my plants upside down. Last I checked, plants don't grow at all upside down or underground. Now, while studying dinosaur tracks at a coal mine in Alberta with a young geologist, I noted a most unusual phenomena. Dozens of upside-down polystrate stumps from giant hollow reeds like the lycopods of Joggins. The roots went into the coal, which was on top of the dinosaur tracks. Obviously, the coal, the dinosaur tracks, and the layers the dinosaur tracks are in, that the trunks cut through, were all laid down rapidly. There is no thousands or millions of years here. The conventional interpretations used to prop up the ideas of an old Earth collapse upon scientific investigation. All of these facts, however, can fit in well within a global catastrophe like Noah's flood. With all of my talk on both this program and in my Crevo rants that evolution must violate the scientific and natural law of biogenesis, the Science Foundation has repeatedly tried to educate me by claiming that Louis Pasteur actually disproved a form of creationism and that the law of biogenesis only applies to modern life. It's obvious he got this idea from Mark Isaac's page in Talk.organs, which says, the spontaneous generation that Pasteur and others disproved was the idea that life forms such as mice, maggots, and bacteria can appear fully formed. They disproved a form of creationism. There is no law of biogenesis saying that very primitive life cannot form from increasingly complex molecules. Now, if your brain just locked up, don't worry, this is a common side effect from trying to understand illogical arguments. To be clear on the matter, let us hear the words of Pasteur himself on the subject. This is the question of what we call spontaneous generation. Mightn't matter perhaps organize itself? Or, posed differently, mightn't creatures enter the world without parents, without forebears? This is the question I seek to resolve. Pasteur was precisely refuting the idea that increasingly complex molecules could form primitive life. Apparently, Isaac and the Science Foundation are hoping the laws of physics and nature were different in the past. Now, it's wonderful to speculate, but the onus is upon you folks for demonstrating that life can form from non-life, as the science that's repeatable, observable, and testable refutes you. But it also blows me away that both Isaac and the Science Foundation both claimed that Pasteur actually refuted a form of creationism. Really? In the words of Dr. Manny Ritos, spontaneous generation is not creationist, but Greek philosophy. And by the way, it is the very conceptual foundation for evolution. Broccoli said essentially the same thing. If Pasteur disproved a form of creationism, it was the type of creationism where Gaia, mother goddess of the earth, used occult power to move matter from less order to more order, i.e. evolution. Evolution is merely a pagan form of creationism, replacing the creator god with an occult power emanating from the earth. It is that pagan evolutionary belief that Pasteur disproved. Lee documents this well in his book, Comparative Views on Origins. It is a ludicrous statement to claim that Pasteur refuted creation. Read Pasteur's comments yourself. He knew full well the ramifications of his experiment. Every form of creation that I know of claims that life only comes from life. Now, yes, we claim that the first life arose from outside of nature, but in the end, that is exactly what evolution must also contend, because the first life has to rise in direct violation of scientific and natural laws. Therefore, if it violates natural laws, it must be supernatural or outside of the natural realm. Ironically, both Isaac and the Science Foundation have both claimed elsewhere that evolution does not attempt to explain the origin of life. So doesn't it seem odd to you that they would suddenly turn around and try and argue against the law of biogenesis? The first life had to have come from outside the natural realm. I would suggest that first life was Jesus Christ, the Creator. mail for me? Fiat58 wrote in for last week's show. Hallelujah, good job, keep up the good work. Evolutionists will hate you, but you are raising valid questions, and you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Good stuff, Ian. Thanks for the effort you put into researching this stuff every week. Eagle Eye 2102 was definitely appropriately named, as they saw my subliminal message in last week's show. There really was no subliminal message, it was just a joke. Wow, this guy has a very poor understanding of evolution. How could he possibly claim that evolution is fishy but not his Bible? No rage here, more bewilderment as to how this guy can claim that something that is backed by literally tons of evidence versus creationism, which is void of evidence. I hope the viewers take this for the load that it is. Thanks for writing in. But apparently, you missed the fun from the week before and several shows back, where I showed how all of the alleged fish tetrapod intermediates were invalidated, both by tetrapod footprints found in Poland, as well as the tetrapod footprints in the bottom of Grand Canyon, which John Mackay publicized back in 1987. Footprints in rocks evolutionarily dated as 525 million years old, which I also went and investigated several years ago. These clear tetrapod footprints predate the alleged fishopods by some 130 million years. Those fossil footprints are only one small part of the literally tons of evidence for creation and refuting evolutionism that you're apparently unaware of. You remember that jock from high school that would pick on the nerd? Then one day the nerd responds to one of the jock's comments, to which the jock cannot respond intelligibly. The jock's reaction to this is to pummel the nerd for finally standing up for himself. Apply the jock to the atheists and the nerd to the creationists, and that is exactly what you have in the comment sections of Ian's videos. Quote, evolution conforms to whatever evidence is presented with because it is not science, end quote. Science is supposed to conform to whatever evidence is presented. This is precisely what shows the difference between creationism and evolution. Creationism does not conform to the evidence, and they see this as a strength, while the theory of evolution does. No, you were talking about pseudoscience. Apparently, you missed the point I was making. If a prediction is made based on evolution, as I showed in the previous show, it fails the predictions miserably. Evolution would not predict tetrapod footprints in 525 million year old rock. But rather than concede that evolution is wrong, evolution is made to fit the evidence, no matter what the evidence is. Therefore, evolution is not scientific because it is not falsifiable. Several people commented on the interesting report of the slowing spin of Venus. Your point at 7-minute mark that the rate of the planet is spinning is constant is not valid. You made the same assumption with your population problem video. It would be like saying yesterday it was 1 degree hotter than today, so 100 days ago we would all be boiling. Do you agree with this reasoning? Your analogy breaks down horribly. We're not talking about a 1 degree temperature change here. We're talking about a rotation change of 6.5 minutes in 16 years. Secondly, I never said the slowing was constant. I merely pointed out the implications if it was. And isn't it amazing how quickly the skeptics will abandon uniformity when it doesn't meet their purposes? The Science Foundation also jumped on this one and was put in its place by T. Chapman 500. So, you decided to give this train wreck another try. Venus spins slowly and in retrograde because of a major surface impact. At the Science Foundation, quote, Venus spins slowly and in retrograde because of a major surface impact, end quote. And how exactly did this high-yield impact manage to keep Venus in a circular orbit? And why is there no evidence of the impact? There should be a crater at least a couple of 100 miles deep if it was indeed an impact, assuming that the planet didn't become another ring around the sun first. The solar system has 2 of those already. It's also the point that the planet's rotation is slowing down, which you dodged the issue completely. Indeed, the physics are quite simple. Such alleged impacts would destroy the planet. And if there was a continuing barrage of small impacts slowing it down or spinning it in retrograde, then we should see evidence of this, as the slowing has persisted even in the last 16 years. I find the YouTube tirades against you to be disagreeable, and I am neither a Christian nor a creationist. Personal insults have no place in debate or rational discussion. It is commendable that you do not stoop to their level. Thank you for writing in, Herbie Pop. If anyone is interested, Genesis Week will be airing on Otter Tunes beginning in May. Ian, excellent work with the piece about so-called vestigial organs. I've been saying for years that the appendix serves as a disease filter, an incubator for symbiotic bacteria, and a means of replenishing those bacteria once they are lost. Science is now finally willing to admit I was right. Very interesting you predicted that, Otter, and glad to see your predictions sown true. Well, that's it for this week. I'm your host, Ian Juby. I hope you'll join me again next Thursday. Please subscribe up above and use the convenient share button down below to post this video on TwitFace+, or to embed it in your blog or website. Let us remember the words of our Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ, who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me." We'll see you on the flip side. Production software was provided for Genesis Week by the Big Valley Creation Science Museum, located just 25 minutes north of Drumheller, Alberta, in the heart of Dinosaur Badlands. The Big Valley Creation Science Museum was built from the ground up to give credit to our Creator, portraying the scientific evidence showing that creation is the faith that fits the facts, and evolution is the faith that the facts have failed. Visit bvcsm.com for more details.